You're doing a lot. You're not lazy. I'm not seeing somebody lazy in front of me, for example. You're judging yourself as lazy. I know you have the idea that you're lazy, reframing it a little bit for me so that I could see, oh, yeah, that's the idea that I'm lazy. If I'm looking at my life, not seeing the life of a lazy person.
Welcome. I'm Andy Carlson, and you're listening to the Time with Tim podcast. Each episode, we explore the impact of complex trauma through the personal journeys of our guests. Along the way, we'll connect with experts and individuals who share their unique perspectives, insights, and practical tools to help you on your healing journey. Let's take this time to learn together. Welcome back. Today we're looking into the NeuroAffective Relational Model, or NARM, an approach designed to help people heal from complex trauma by reconnecting with their authentic selves. Joining me again is Gabriel, who shared his personal healing journey with us in a previous conversation. This time he's here to help us understand the core principles of NARM and even guide us through some practical applications. So whether you're on your own healing journey or simply exploring how trauma shapes identity and relationships, I hope this conversation offers something meaningful for you. Welcome back, Gabriel.
Hi, Andy.
Hey. And so, for those who may not have listened to our previous conversation, could you just briefly reintroduce yourself and also share how you first encountered NARM?
Yes, my name is Gabriel. I'm a facilitator and coach in the Tim Fletcher universe. I have been into whatever you might call it, self-development, character refinement, or even trauma therapy for quite some time, but more on the uh, pop cultural and also on the shamanic side. Really scientific stuff actually came into my life when I encountered Tim and when I did my education in this clinical framework that is called NARM, the NeuroAffective Relational Model. So, and I've been practicing NARM, so I'm a practitioner of NARM for about 3 years. So I hope to expand on that today in the conversation with you.
Could you share what drew you to NARM and how has it impacted your personal and professional life?
I think NARM is the one thing that has made the biggest impact so far. Um, and why is that? I think the most important thing is that NARM is a very friendly, a very like relatable, slow, smooth way of learning to relate to yourself. And when I did an intro weekend about NARM, I listened to the guy teaching it and doing some demonstrations, and it was not about making interventions. It was not about, so imagine your inner child, and now you're saying something to him, and now something changes. It was way more basic. There were questions like, ah, your face changed right now. I'm interested in how you're talking to yourself in this moment. It was very based in the here and now, based in what capacity the human being that was sitting in front of the therapist has, and the therapist was part of the equation, not just somebody who who brings the client along or something like that. It was as
Mm,
if they were having an actual relationship and an actual relating with each other in that moment. And that was the healing thing. And that
mm.
impressed me quite a bit. And I was really drawn to it and I wanted to learn it.
It seems like there's something like very kind of real about that, just like you and I are in this conversation, having a relationship right now is like recognizing that fact in kind of the therapist and client role as well as that relationship and being real and present with it. Would you, is there, I don't know if this is simple or not, but would you be able to give like a high level overview of what
Mhm,
NARM is and maybe how it differs, if there are any other ways that it differs from other trauma informed
mhm.
approaches?
Well, what I think is the interesting thing with NARM, and I think that is also a little bit the way that I am woven. I like to do principle-based things and value-based things, so that within the principles and within the values, and maybe in NARM it's also called the pillars of NARM, within that I can develop really my own way of relating and of sensing somebody else. So that was very attractive to me, that I didn't go to like some kind of "Oh, here is the paradigm. You have to do this, and if you do it, then you're within the paradigm. If you're not doing that, then you're outside of the paradigm." So that is what high level was for me different in NARM. There is no technique, so to say. Everybody, and I have experienced quite some NARM therapists and practitioners, they all have a different kind of style. Well, the thing that is very interesting about NARM that I also found is that it's specifically aimed at developmental and complex trauma.
Mm.
It
Mhm.
is made for helping people to reconnect with themselves, to 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 think about and feel about the way they attach, um, to figure out what the conflicts around relationship to themselves and to others are about, how they created their adaptations in childhood, and how these adaptations from childhood are still alive in the right here, right now. There is a lot of right here, right now work, because all of our survival adaptations, when they're bugging us, they're coming up every time, every day, you know? So so from there, it is really, really made for looking at shame, for looking at self-rejection, looking at self-hatred, and it aims towards resources. It's that's the also an interesting thing about NARM. It is resource based. We never just like dig around in the painful stuff. We would only do that when we have clarified before where the client wants to be in an embodied being kind of level. So so usually NARM starts like a normal coaching, like a normal life coaching. You clarify a contract with somebody
Mm.
and you figure out, where does this person want to be? Not how does this person want to do things differently, but what is this person longing for to embody for themselves in the future? And then we're looking at what's in the way. And that we kind of deconstruct that, and usually then feelings come up, and usually then the older stuff, the stuff that not usually in a way, the stuff that we're not used to comes up, and then we can look at that, unpack that a little, and create more awareness around it, and help the client to relate to themselves once this stuff has come up. So I think that's the nugget of NARM. It
Mhm.
really it really focuses on the relationship between the client and the coach, and it also focuses on the relationship of the client with him or herself, but on a resource-based way. Like, where do you want to go? What is already working, and how can you like kind of organize yourself in another way by having more awareness, a resource in that case.
Mm. Yeah, and so like I hear you mentioning that relationship aspect between the coach and then also with self. And it sounds as if you're saying too that there's very much a come as you are for the coach or therapist as well as
Exactly.
for the client. And then you mentioned, this focus on developmental trauma. Um, could you talk about developmental trauma and attachment trauma kind of as it differs from single incident trauma or what they call shock trauma? Like, why is that distinction important? What is the distinction?
Yes, I can talk about that. Um, well, so since I'm not educated in how to treat shock trauma, I can only give you superficial knowledge about shock trauma,
Hmm.
and I can give you a little bit more in-depth knowledge about developmental trauma. So, I mean, shock trauma, we have all probably learned this is this big T trauma. Something happened, there was an impact, might have been like a car accident or something like that, and then after the accident, things are not the way they were before because because it was not possible for the person to keep going because there's some kind of shock in the system. Here's the clear differentiation between PTSD and complex PTSD, um, as written in the NARM, a practice book called The Practical Guide to Healing Developmental Trauma. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is coming from a single event. And what happens to a person after this event is that there might be a continued sense of threat and avoidance that has to do with whatever has to do with the event and a re-experiencing of the event. That's the three things that are happening to people with post-traumatic stress disorder. So we can also talk about soldiers and so on. That is very, very much known in soldiers. They're re-experiencing, they're avoiding, and there is a constant sense of threat. The thing with complex PTSD is that, as you know from Tim, complex PTSD is there is not a single event. There is more a milieu in which a kid had to grow up, and there and there were constant maybe traumas happening, but there was also an empty place where certain needs of the kid were not fulfilled on a continual basis, and the kid had to find strategies around that to kind of survive with what was there. So the criteria for complex PTSD then are they have the same thing. They have a sense of threat, they have an avoidance that is organized around the things that they didn't have or had too much, and there is a re-experiencing of the traumatic events. But what comes on top of that for people from complex PTSD is they also have affect dysregulation, they have a
Hmm.
negative self-concept, and they experience interpersonal disturbances. Also, and that on a continual basis. So they bring the milieu that they grew up in into their grown-up life and try to like apply the rules that they have figured out for themselves in relating to the other people around them. But they're applying that from a negative self-concept. They learned that they're not good enough. That's the whole shame thing. And that they learned that there are certain difficulties that they have in relating with others. Always, when I try to make new friends, this and that happens. And or yeah, so and always if I'm in this or that situation, I feel really warm, or I can't think anymore, and things like that. And all of that is
Hmm.
aimed towards relationships. It's all aimed towards like interpersonal stuff going on, which somebody who had a car accident, their trauma is probably more organized around this car accident. There might be even arenas in this person's life who are not affected at all.
So the complex trauma is a lot broader with that, as you said, like the affect and then also the relational. What about like symptoms like anxiety and depression? How would NARM view those?
Well, NARM, as far as I have understood it and seen it demonstrated with people who are way further down the road than I am, NARM would relate to the person that is coming with anxiety. NARM would never say anxiety is this and that and that and that. Of course, as a therapist or as a coach, you have to know a lot about anxiety, and your knowledge is important. But your knowledge is only important to help you create good hypotheses in your own head. But you're not going to tell the client, so your anxiety is this and that,
Mm,
and anxiety is usually treated like that and that. It's more like, okay, so tell me a little bit more about a situation where your anxiety peaks. I'm interested in that. And I'm interested in what happens to you as you're talking about that. That would be the norm approach. It would always go to a relating rather than a theorizing.
mm. I see they're not pathologizing the client as well. You're still seeing, you're relating
Exactly.
to the client as a whole human and relating in the
Yeah.
present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I've heard about this pathologizing from NARM practitioners is pathologizing somebody in front of them in order to help them. When they come to you with complex trauma, that means they have already a negative self-concept. This basically just facilitates them shaming themselves more. And they already did that. They already went on YouTube and on Google. They know what their problem is. They have already shamed themselves with that. They don't need that in that moment. They need somebody who listens, who leans in, and who is there for them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that I really like because, in a lot of therapies, you focus on the past, like how you were hurt, when you were hurt, and thinking on that. And I know you touched on this a little bit, but I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit more about that principle of not focusing on the past, but on the present pattern. Like how is that more important? How does that help people heal?
Let's try an example. Um, so I'm rejected by somebody, and the whole kaboom happens in me. The whole like, oh my God, I'm not good enough. And then I'm so angry at them. And then acting out. And and then we have a fight. And then we split up or whatever. And then I'm sitting in front of my NARM therapist. So and what 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 would be interesting from this NARM perspective, and I try to generalize here, would be, okay, let's rewind that and see what happened to you and how you treated yourself internally and how you related to yourself, maybe at the worst moment of it all. And how is it for you to talk about this right now, this recent event? Um, that is more important because that is something that actually happened to this person recently. Why is that? So one thing the norm trainer really often emphasized, he said, you don't really need to talk to people about their childhoods because that's all they already survived that.
Mm,
So they actually won. And it was very helpful what they did as kids. Even if you, I don't know, if you isolate it in your room, sitting there waiting for the shouting of the parents to die down because they then finally got drunk or something like that, or fell asleep. Even sitting there being invisible, that was the best the child could do. So NARM either takes that perspective, hey, wow, you survived. It's the best that you could do. But now, this isolating thing, it just doesn't work anymore. So if somebody rejected me and I went isolating and so on, I'm exactly doing what I did back then. But now it's a problem. Now I'm not getting what I want. Now I'm not getting the connection or the resolve or the relief that I want in relationship with this other person. It's just because I'm applying a strategy and I'm shaming myself through it,
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'm sitting alone in my room. So it's much more important for a grown-up to look at these things that are happening just recently, how this child stuff kind of is activated in us, and take that apart and look at that a little bit closer and a little bit deeper, and see maybe if there are some emotions stuck in us that want to be felt or want to be expressed, so that we can actually, this is like a freeing the kid that we were, but in the here and now. So that is why, from the norm perspective, it's more important to do it that way around, because then you're basically you can do that in a conversation with another person. And you can help them deconstruct it, and you can react directly to what is happening to them right now as they're talking about it. Sometimes somebody's face then starts dropping or something, and they're not communicating in that moment. But as you're seeing them, you can say, "Hey, I'm noticing your face is really changing right now, and I'm really curious what is happening inside of you." And then maybe we caught that moment that is really important to shine the light on for this person to understand a little bit deeper what they're doing internally. But was that an
Yeah.
answer?
Yeah. No, no, I think that was great. I think, there's a couple of things of like, the real power to change comes in the present. And there's
Yes.
something else that you said there too, which I think correlates, and it just really struck me. It really hit me. It's like, there'll be times where I'll look at the past and kind of relive it, go into a very painful state, relive it, or feel a lot of shame. But the comment you made is like, you survived childhood. You've already won. That there's just something when you said like you've already won that
Yeah.
really struck. Yeah, and you mentioned in here kind of like how there's like isolation or these different adaptive styles. Like, could you
Mhm.
talk about like, I know NARM has 5 major adaptive styles. Could you talk about
Yeah.
how they are and how they shape our identity and relationships?
Let's just go through the way that NARM actually explains it.
Mm,
So a child has core needs,
mm-hmm,
and these needs usually need to be met from the outside. So from the primary caregivers, the parents, or the environment. So when a child then experiences failure of the environment, it needs to do something with that. And what it then does, it has to rely on strategies of disconnection. It has to somehow disconnect from the moment or from the need or whatever is happening inside. That leads to the child having a smaller capacity for this particular need that was not met. because capacity grows if I'm a toddler and I want to like crawl away from my mom, and I'm crawling away 2 meters, and I turn around and I see her on her smartphone, and she's gone. She's out. She's not there. And I panic. Mom, where are you? So I'm sitting. I don't have the idea to go back to her or whatever. I'm just sitting there and I panic. And she looks up and she says, "Why are you crying? I'm right here." So so what a child has to do in that moment is to disconnect from this need of being like, mom, attune to me. Please feel me. These 2 meters, they're too much already, and you're gone. Ah. So there is a way that a child has to organize him or herself in that moment. And it will do this via disconnection. So there are different strategies that children pick, and these strategies are organized according to their age. So the first survival style is called connection survival style. This is very early in childhood. It could be even in utero and could be around birth and a little bit after birth. This is all about, am I welcome in the world? Is it okay that this little nervous system is welcome in the world? That means I'm hungry, I'm being fed. It means I'm somebody needs to change my diapers because it's smelling and burning, and this is happening. I'm somehow sad because I'm growing and my body hurts, and somebody is there to hold me. And even in utero, like somebody's actually happy that I'm in there. And there is not this cocktail of hormones surging through the mother that is clearly about anxiety and what am I going to do about having this child and so on. So all of this is about connection, welcome in the world. And then the next one is attunement. Okay, child's out, and it has all these needs. All these needs. And, nobody looking or being with a child will forever meet all the needs. But if there is a grown-up who's attuned to themselves and can fulfill their own needs, it's actually possible to tune into this child, not on a mechanical level, but like a real attunement from the heart. And if a child gets that, it doesn't get the attunement survival style. But if that is kind of compromised, then a lot of strategies will be centered around needs met or needs not met. Then the next one is called trust. This is like an older child. I don't really know, like maybe 2, 3. So can I trust you to be on my side? This is already that has a cognitive function to it. And the other ones, they are probably pre-verbal. And the trust survival style is a little bit like, okay, there's somebody online, there's somebody looking out of their eyes and wants to relate to the world. So can I trust that you will be there? Can I trust that I can try things and you will let me fail, but you will also like carry me at the same time? But the problem is, if that is not met, then they might be like, I can't trust anybody. I need to like, lots of people go through life like, I can't trust anybody. I need to take care of this all of my own. Why does nobody support me? And blah blah blah. All these things. And that would be the trust survival style, the autonomy survival style. I think like 3/4 of the planet has that one. That is actually, will you let me do it? And when I turn around, will you still be there? And when I want to be alone, will you let me? Or will you transgress? Will you control me? Or will you just create the boundary that is necessary for me to grow and support me and see me where I want to grow? And with all the helicopter parents that are running around nowadays, and also with our whatever could be parents that are basically just a little bit too engaged or a little bit too less engaged. It's like you have to really then start knowing your kids when they grow older. And if love or connection is compromised in that area, people have the autonomy survival style. So this is a lot of like these are the naysayers. You suggest something to them and they say, just because you said it to me, I will not do it the way you said it.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Like I think Tim calls it the oppositional defiance disorder. Um, Everything around that. It's like it's a most of the times a very tight body. Somebody who's like, okay, I'm gonna pull through with this on my own, or I'm gonna bring you along. But if anything doesn't go the way I want it to, I'm gonna figure out how to get how I want it. That would be the autonomy survival style. And the last one is love and sexuality survival style. Um, that's kind of difficult to explain. We can like leave the sexuality out of it for a moment. For me, the love and sexuality would be, can I go out there in the world, into the world, be loved? Did I get enough? Like, is my love tank full? And can I go out there and expect that this will be a good experience? Something like that. So when the child then has enough autonomy and can do the steps out into the world, I don't know, maybe kindergarten or preschool or something like that, and expect that this is all a good experience. And if it's compromised there, it might very often be that they're very rigid and controlling, and they figure out ways to really get what they want. The interesting thing about these survival styles is that if you only have love and sexuality as a problem, you like you were attuned to, you were connected with, you can trust, you have enough autonomy, you have a lot of life force at your disposal.
Mm.
Like, yeah, if you only have been traumatized when you were 5 and everything before that was okay, um, you can really shape the world. You can really make something out of that. You're already cognitively kind of online. You don't have to be afraid, and you can really start like making everything the way you want. So
Mm.
there is a rigidity to um, make things perfect. So that is the love, sexuality, survival style. Okay, quick run through. Maybe some of the listeners have found themselves here or there.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's interesting to see this progression of like the human child, the human organism
Hmm.
from even in utero, newborn baby, and going from this connection to
Yeah,
attunement
yeah, yeah.
to trust to autonomy to love and sexuality. I have a question, but I want to, before I get to that, you mentioned the failure of the environment. And I think
Yeah.
this is something that NARM kind of approaches a little bit different because a lot of times when we grow up in maybe a shame and blame culture or shame and blame household, we want to shame and blame the parents for failing us. But like NARM talks about this environmental failure instead. Could you kind of touch on that?
I mean, I think it's not very specific to NARM. Um, what I mean, environment is culture. Yes, we can, and we have experienced that it might be, or you and I know that it comes up that blaming the parents might be coming up, or in recovery, and then not wanting to blame the parents because one knows that, well, yeah, they did their best. Um, but if you kind of zoom out of the households, then you can say we are swimming in a culture where some things are welcome and some things are not welcome.
There is a lot of focus on like shame and disconnection from the authentic self, from this natural life force. Could you maybe explain or give some more examples of how those show up and maybe how a NARM therapist might work with them?
Well, we can maybe go through the adaptive survival styles,
Mm,
and I can just run through it. What the shame is about for which survival style,
mm-hmm.
and then we can look where we go from there.
Okay.
So the connection survival style feels shame at existing, at feeling and connecting. Just imagine that, nobody connected to you. There was not like, hello, new human. So I can tell you what, when I encounter somebody like that in a coaching session, um, there is no use in, you know, doing all these sophisticated interventions with people like that. They're actually, that's courageous enough that they dare to come to a Zoom meeting and sit in front of somebody who calls themselves a therapist or a coach and 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 try to connect with them. So so with that kind of early trauma, it would be actually way enough for people like that to sit there and be able to, you know, come from this disconnected state that they might be in to be with me for a moment and then notice when they're going away again.
Mm.
So that might be a way the sessions might be shaped. Um, and for me as a coach to understand that, I need to, of course, then sit there. I need to know about the connection survival style, and I need to know about observing the person that I'm working with, because there are cues, like especially like the out, like looking away, or suddenly not knowing what we were talking about, and things like that. So how I'm dealing with shame in this kind of survival style would be, okay, there needs to be a very, very gentle presence that I need to bring, because they needed to disconnect almost fully in their childhood. It was so painful. They disconnected fully. They're not there. They're not even allowed to feel, to exist. So as a NARM practitioner, that would be then my first prerogative to, over time, in many sessions, um, to 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 give permission to feel. But then it comes also that they don't have enough capacity. So feeling a little bit every time is probably the wiser choice than to throw them the feelings wheel and say, do that 5 minutes per hour. It
Mm-hmm.
overwhelms them completely. So I'm chunking it up right now. So working with shame would be learning where they're at and meeting them where they're at, and then also showing up as the healthy person they need to relate to have this kind of interaction that they might have missed as kids.
It sounds from what you're sharing that there's like a mix between a little bit of a somatic focus, but also a cognitive focus.
Yeah.
Are they both integrated? How is that viewed?
Yeah, NARM likes the top-down and the bottom-up approach. So NARM is happy happy with talking about something and then seeing how it is to actually acknowledge what we're thinking here and how that resonates in the body. But it also is happy with like something's coming up in the body and now we're trying to find words for it. So there are two ways information can travel, and that's also very important because ultimately, and I think that's what I also really like about NARM because it's very agnostic about what a healthy human being is.
Mm.
Um, Ultimately, we just want people to learn to relate to themselves from a grown-up perspective. Be able to do what we do in the session when they're alone.
Yeah. Well, so with that, there's this is actually something that I really appreciated when I was reading up about this to talk to you. But there's they, in our society is very much this destination approach, achievement approach, rather than kind of
Hmm.
the journey approach or a curious or exploratory approach. Could you, and that's something that I think I find still difficult for myself is like, it's really hard not to be goal oriented. Like I want to be better tomorrow than I am today, or I want to reduce this shame by this much, or I want to, I'm always like looking at these goals. Like, could you talk about, this difference and then this kind of more of a exploratory approach versus like the problem solving approach?
Yeah. I think what I want to say as a prologue is that everything has its place. I think even
Mm,
like setting goals and achieving them has its place. It, I think human beings shouldn't just be reduced to floating through nature. What I'm
mm-hmm,
seeing about myself, having had a few NARM sessions myself, um, and having looked at shame and how shame comes up and how I'm shaming myself with things and how I relate to myself when I'm angry and how I relate to myself when I'm afraid and like having a person in front of me who was very adapted at attuning to me and seeing how I needed this attunement and how I needed also to be, for example, told, you're doing a lot. You're not lazy. I'm not seeing somebody lazy in front of me, for example. You're judging yourself as lazy. I know you have the idea that you're lazy. Like, like reframing it a little bit for me so that I could see, oh, yeah, that's the idea that I'm lazy. If I'm looking at my life, not seeing the life of a lazy person. So, um, that is a little bit about my own growth. Having looked at these things and having maybe, let's say, taken out the pressure of a few of these moments, places in me, um, I can now see that, of course, I want to use my life for something that I think is worthwhile doing. So, very interesting. Training now for 6 months on a regular basis. I'm like, oh, I'm having this idea that only stupid people work out. But the reality that I'm sensing right now is it's actually so good to have a trained body, no back pain anymore. I'm present in my body. I have the sense of having a little bit more testosterone. I have proof that I have discipline. And that is a very grown-up way to think about the last 6 months working out. Um, so that's why I'm saying I think everything has its place. If you are living a shame-based life with deep self-rejection, and you haven't deconstructed that yet, pulled that apart, looked at it, brought awareness and curiosity and exploration in that, you have to push very hard. And the pushing hard is probably not pushing against the world. You're pushing against yourself mostly. Half maybe. But a lot of it might be pushing against yourself. Because when you try to do something where you are showing up on the stage of life, where you're maybe reshaping something or whatnot, you will be confronted with shame from whatever survival style that you are having. Or you might be confronted with the opposite of shame, that is actually shame too, which is called pride. I can't trust anybody, I'm so poor and lonely. Or F them, I'm gonna do it on my own. I'm the winner. Yeah? That would be the same thing. It just turned around into pride. And it's probably backfire in exactly the same way as shame. So exploration and curiosity and opening up is really necessary in order to come to grips with what's going on in there. The NARM people call that internal organization. So how you actually are organizing yourself, what the consequences are from this internal organization, and then ultimately, okay, what then do you create in the world? And if the internal organization is like shame, self-attack, self-rejection, super identified with whatever drama is going on right now, well, I mean, as within, so without. So look at that first, and then you can comfortably start to expand into the world.
With this internal organization, and I think some of what you're talking here is like there's some of these like labels that we apply either to others or to ourselves. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting in reading about this is in studying some esoteric spiritual traditions. One of the things I realized they were talking
Ooh.
about, but in different words in a different language, that I saw and that I could realize was that we often we live in a society, we live in a world where we objectify the world, we objectify ourselves, and so that idea of ourselves is kind of this object, and so what I like noticed in some of these religious traditions is like we're moving towards this, being the subject, being this living experience, being this the life force, this living expression. And so NARM, I was really interested to see that they make this subjectification. I forget how the word they use, subjectification versus objectification. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Because it's really interesting for me to hear it from a modern psychological perspective versus a 2,000-year-old text.
I'm gonna probably leave the NARM the NARM framework here. I'm gonna start with something strong that my NARM trainer said. He said, "Let me give you the definition of narcissism."
Mm,
And then everybody was like, "No, something very elaborative is coming." And he said, "Well, it's just somebody who objectifies themselves and everybody around them. It's like looking at a chair, seeing a chair, and not liking that the chair is where it is and wanting it somewhere else. That's objectification." So
mhm.
imagine thinking of yourself like that.
It's an object
Ugh.
to be used and moved
Yeah,
or
I'm an
reacted to.
object to be used. And I'm even self-righteous about it.
Mm,
Because in my own view of myself, I have I have to be good. Everybody kind of has to be good. If you shame yourself, you kind of also do that to be good, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm objectifying myself, and I'm telling myself that the way I am right now is not good enough, and I have the means to fix myself, get myself there where I want to go. And I relate to the others exactly the same way. So I see myself as a chair, and also everybody else is a chair as well. What is missing is relationship. This has a very functional way of existing. And if we're looking at the world right now, um, it's gotten even worse in the last 5 years. And what can I say about this subjective process that I am? I see myself as a living process. That's going into spirituality.
So, and that's something that I kind of felt like reading this book, that there were a few places that for me it felt that there are parts that were connected to a more
Yeah.
spiritual sense.
So when I'm setting up the sessions, like when a new client comes in,
Mm.
um, it is kind of prudent coming from NARM to to clarify the contract that you're having
Mm.
with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, on the one hand, you want to know what kind of state of being do they want to embody once you're done with them. But clarifying the this contract in the sense of what would you like to get out of our work together here? And then listening between the lines when the people say a lot of strategies, what they want to do in a new way and what they want to have in a new way, but they miss the being most of the times. Well, they just came out of society and landed in my office. So my job is to like sense what is it actually that they're describing on a being level. And I think that is really beautiful when I'm kind of summarizing when we have worked through that, what people want to be like. You know, what kind of state of beingness they want to embody. Let's put it like that. They want to be at peace with themselves. They want to be at peace with the world. They want to be at peace with themselves in situation where it is difficult for them to be at peace. They want to be connected to themselves. They want to be able to trust themselves and their gut feeling. They want to be able to trust a contact that they have with another human. And like looking at that, we can just, if you have ever been on a spiritual retreat, that's usually the result on the Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
On the Monday, everybody crashes, but that's usually the result on the Sunday at the end of the spiritual retreat. We feel connected, we feel trusting, we feel there, we're at peace. So that is what people are longing for. That is what people are coming in to lift for, into sessions with us for. And I think this is highly encouraging coming from this subjective thing that you were asking about and from the self-objectification that I introduced narcissism with. It's like actually people want the opposite. They want to be at peace with the things, maybe even as they are. And then we're just looking at what's in the way, what comes up. And then sometimes self-objectification comes up. Sometimes shame comes up. Sometimes grief or anger comes up. Um, and then under these emotions, some of them are the usual emotions. And then under these emotions, there might be something else. And then looking at that and completing these emotions can be very, very helpful to then suddenly they're sitting there being like, I'm at peace right now. So yes, it really has a spiritual dimension because it's not about getting people to function better in society. That's not the goal. And by the way, also wasn't Freud's goal. I read that up. He just watered it down a bit for this whole psychoanalysis thing to be a bit more palatable. And yeah, the path towards that is exploration and curiosity.
And so it's you bringing in your exploration and curiosity, and in a way, kind of encouraging and opening that up within the client.
Exactly. And for that to be possible, I will have to look at where I am still afraid, or am I shaming myself, where I'm angry, where I'm doing this or doing that. So, so I mean, there are clients who trigger me. So it is basically also a constant exploration of my own stuff that I have to do at the side, not in the same session, in order to bring the kind of openness and curiosity and also wisdom to the interaction that is necessary.
So let me see if I understand what you said there in a little bit. Is like there's something about you being kind of very real and authentic yourself as the therapist. And so, what I often see is like kind of normal therapy is that, that cold, dispassionate, I got my notepad and my pen and I'm observing you and writing down my judgments and ideas.
Yeah.
But there's not necessarily, it's like, oh, damn, Gabriel, you just triggered, I'm feeling this discomfort in my stomach right now. Like there's something like being triggered, like talking about like what's real and alive inside of you as well.
Yeah. I would always frame it with, as you have been talking about this, I noticed this lump in my
Mm,
stomach.
hmm
I'm wondering, it could be that this is just my stuff going on here right now, but I wonder if that resonates with you. And then sometimes they go
mm.
like, yeah, I got the same lump.
Yeah, like I have a trigger and I'm projecting something onto you, but then also, sometimes you meet with a client and you feel awkward, but that feeling of awkwardness is that resonance in a way of kind of where they're coming into the session.
Absolutely.
And so instead of being cold and distant, you're being very relational, very present, very honest, and very real with yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. I mean, that is this, as far as I understood, this is the part that NARM stole from psychodynamic psychotherapy.
Mm,
When the client is going through something and then the therapist suddenly falls asleep because there is this connection going on, and then something important happens and that kind of resonates in the therapist as well.
mm,
Um, so I mean, that's actually for me it's the fun part. As good codependent, I'm already very trained in perceiving the other. Um, but the training that I'm going through with the clients that I'm having one-on-one, it's actually, the cool thing is to only stay with the other 50% of my perceptive capacity and to give myself the other 50% so that so that I can say, if they look at me, there's somebody actually present. Not this is somebody like leaning in, being like, "Oh, what's happening?" Or somebody being completely detached with his notepad there, and being like, "Oh, it's interesting. Tell me more about that." Um,
mm.
so being like in the middle of it. So, and what that makes possible, and I think that is the coolest thing that NARM trains you in, is you become a sensor.
Mm.
You train your antennas inside and outside. So you're being, I mean, that's the thing. That's the rapport that you're building there. You're building a connection between you and the other. You're building a connection between you and yourself. You might be even be building a connection between you and the child self of the other and you and the grown-up self of the other. And you have to also have to have a connection between the child self and the grown-up self inside of you. So I think that's coming from NLP, like this five triple layered rapport. But actually,
Mm.
that is what is very, very cool because it's kind of inbuilt into NARM that you're asked to have the antennas out and to have the antennas in at the same time. It's like that. You're showing up as you're kind of showing up as a healthy grown up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the name of the therapy that you said they kind of adapted this
I think
from?
it's called psychodynamic therapy.
Psychodynamic. And so there's this deep attunement to kind of your own, in a way,
Yeah.
you're saying antenna, but like your own intuition, your own gut, like the
Hmm.
changes that are going on inside of you and
Yeah,
how
exactly.
that's connected to the relationship in this moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't know much about psychodynamics. Um, I guess I was only taught this 50-50 part to keep that up
Mm.
in my contact with the clients.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that would be amazing to do that all day.
Mm. Is that something that you do during your daily life, or that you're aware of more during your daily life?
Um, I'm I'm aware of I really got aware of that when I started practicing NARM and when I tried to learn the techniques,
Mm.
um, that the way I started to relate to uh, closer people changed.
Mm.
I was
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more removed because I was leaning too much in.
Mm.
So I was like, oh, it's so much more relaxing to look at them a little bit more from the outside and not to crawl into them all the time. And this is also, yeah, it's a really good space and distance.
So I know that in NARM they also talk about agency,
Mm.
kind of rediscovering choice. Can you maybe talk through how you would help somebody work with agency, and then also like maybe how we could recognize, like, if we're operating out of one of these survival adaptations versus what is an authentic choice?
Yeah. Um, I mean, first of all, if if shame is high, agency is low because shame is the magic killer. And this is a big question. What is agency? Because we need to define that first before we can go any further. I think if you grew up English speaking, you have a little bit more of a feeling what is meant if the word agency is said. As a German native speaker, I looked at that and I was like, that's the A in CIA. So I like needed to like reverse engineer that for myself. Yeah, okay. So agency has to do something with direction and with purpose or
Mm.
something like that. It has the flavor of purpose. It wants something for myself, something connected to, and now back to NARM, something apparently connected to the life force that was bubbling through me while I was a toddler and so on. And so what I'm seeing right now is when um, one of the pillars of NARM is actually called reinforcing agency.
Mm.
So that is one of the lenses that I'm looking through when I'm relating to my client. And that basically kind of means I'm looking at them and I'm seeing like there is this life force glimpses coming out of them. And of course, I don't want to pathologize them and just like sit with them in the deep, dark shadow of their beingness. Might be necessary here or there. But reinforcing agency would mean that, of course, we like work on the shame, we work on how they like try to like keep life force down
Mm.
and not like, "Ugh," like expand and be a human being. Um, so so my idea would be whenever that comes up,
Mm.
I pull that thread a little bit
Mm.
because that is what people usually didn't allow themselves because
Mm.
agency was shamed or it was necessary to
Mhm.
like install shame in order for this life force that is connected to agency not to come out in such a forceful and alive way. So whenever that comes out, I pointed it because like that, everybody and me, myself too, going back to my therapist who said, "You're doing a lot and you're not lazy."
Mm.
Like she
Mhm.
was reinforcing agency there. She
Mm.
was like
Mhm.
switching the lens I'm looking at myself in that moment towards being like, honest, actually, I'm doing a lot and it's all aligned with who I want to be. Oh. And then suddenly I saw the cascade of agency that I was building on for the last 2 years.
Mm.
So yeah, it's my job kind of to point at it as well.
So there's like you're calling it out there when you're recognizing it because we
Yeah,
may not recognize it in ourselves. And I think too, there's it sounds like this is related a little bit to uh it kind of crosses paths with internal locus of control versus external locus of control. So like recognizing what's coming from my own will, my own passion, my own desire, rather than trying to please you or please somebody else
exactly.
or please society.
NARM calls that um, in external locus of control. Yeah, maybe Larry would not agree, but um, uh, limited separation individuation. So you
Mm.
can't like it's not easy for you to separate from the others or separate from what's going on in you. Have a little bit of a disidentification, be an observer, but you're like completely invested in the drama of your life. And you still have this individuation. It's like um, borrowed from the Jung perspective. Individuation basically means how much do you know yourself? How much do you know who you are? We know people from complex trauma, one of the characteristics of complex trauma is I don't know who I am. So agency can't be high there, even if you're a workaholic. So, and then the internal locus of control would be high separation and individuation. I know who I am. I know where I'm going. I know where I'm coming from. I know what I want. Yeah. So, and that is basically also the space where agency dominates then.
Just since you brought it up, I'm cough cough asking for a friend. Uh, let's say I know somebody who has a pattern of overworking or perfectionism. Like
Mhm.
how might NARM help me approach that differently?
Well, we would maybe, first of all, we would maybe look at what's the that's embodied state of being that you would like to have for yourself.
Mm.
And then we might look at a situation where you do not have this, or where you would like to have a little bit more of this embodied state of being, maybe even related to this perfectionism thing that you talked about.
Mm.
Is there a situation that might come up around that. And then you talk about the situation, and then things start to happen, and then probably the situation is being dragged from a week ago to the here and now. And then we can just like oscillate between back then and what's happening now, and how is it actually to, if you're like talking to yourself like that, how is that when you're so perfectionistic? Like, can you describe that for me? What are you doing with yourself in that moment? I think I get very like tingly and my jaw really starts hurting or whatnot. It's like, okay, is that happening right now? Yeah, kind of. Okay. So how is it to experience that in this moment? Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, so it's like that we could like take it apart a little bit, and maybe we find some more things.
Wow. And I like the beginning of that approach is there's kind of this positive of like what's the embodied state of what we'd like to be.
Mhm.
And so almost kind of a reframing
Yeah,
of adding something new or being this thing rather than necessarily what I want to get rid of or what I want to shed.
yeah. Well, I mean, you or your friend, um, you created this perfectionistic strategy, um, for a reason, a good reason. And I mean, we could like brush by that as well. What's the good reason this is something that your friend does?
Well, so this friend was often only given validation or praise for getting perfect scores and
Hmm.
was even, was always pointed out the faults for getting a 98 out of 100 or for making slight wrongs and was often punished or threatened for slight imperfections.
That's sad to hear. Because 98 is also still almost perfect, isn't it?
Not in this friend's world. That actually that, it's so the last thing I said was a little bit of a joke, but as an authentic response, like as I heard that, there's like this I don't know. There was like a feeling of sadness, but also a realization um, that 98 is almost perfect or close to perfect.
Mhm. And if I were a good NARM practitioner, I would have caught that. Because there was a little, you hesitated for a moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And this has it. I got that. I understand. I caught
Mm,
it.
mm-hmm,
So I was like, hey, there was this hesitation. I said this to you, and there was this short moment before you had a little bit of an explanation or whatnot. But
mm-hmm.
I'm interested in this little moment there. I'm curious
Yeah,
about.
yeah. Because there was like it is weird living in a world where where you're a -2 instead of a plus 98.
Yeah.
And I think that's the world that I've lived most of my life in, is that you only see and feel that -2 rather than that plus
So
98.
if you just take the difference, just taste both of them. If how that is in your system, if you're like plus 98 or -2, what's the different tastes like?
So there's the -2 is like there's this deviation from perfect, but even in talking about it this way, there's like that plus 98 is off of 0. And so there's
Mm,
this greater sense of kind of comfort, peace, joy, achievement, even
mm,
from kind of recognizing I want to say gift. I don't know if that's the right word, but recognizing the gift of having done so well. Like, I think related to this is like a sense of goodness and sometimes badness. And so there's like a goodness, kind of a feeling of goodness associated
mm,
with that
mm.
98. where there's this badness associated with that -2. And so there's like just a huge shift of moving in like really different directions.
Yeah. And I mean that is what I like doing. I like to try these on, and you look at your face, how that changed.
Yeah, no,
Capacity
I
to
can,
really to do really good.
I
That
don't,
seems to vibe with you.
it does really vibe with me. Because again, I'm going to go back to the language I used originally, that deviation. You know, there's this negative deviation from
Hmm.
perfect
And
turned into the sense
just
of
imagine
badness.
back then, somebody would have like said, "Man, Andy, you have the capacity to do really good." I need to explain
Yeah,
to you what
yeah,
capacity means, but man, you have to like, whew, just like that.
yeah. I think it also opens up. There's this window of being able to celebrate myself, like and just to celebrate in general. Um, yeah, coming in having done well and kind of getting rain on the parade versus, I guess, having what area would you say that this would kind of fall in? Would this be like attunement or connection, or
I don't know.
would you look at it from that sense? No.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't right now not look at it from that sense.
Yeah.
I think I would like to then get to know you a little bit more and then compare my notes, so to say.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Capacity to do good, celebrate self. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially how is it to try that on and see how you're experiencing yourself when you're looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see this, I can feel this because I do think that this is there's this constant evaluation that occurs inside of me. And so I can
Mhm.
kind of see just a shift in, even if some of that constant evaluation was changed to be from, uh, I guess what I'd call here maybe more of a growth perspective than, than this self-limiting perspective, would just really change my affect and my mood. And I'm generally a pretty calm guy on the outside, but inside there's still, a lot of turmoil. Yeah. So, well, I appreciate that reframing on there, and I think, right here, I think there's like this. I can see this. I don't want to
By the
call it a
way, I
subtle.
didn't reframe. You did it. You did it yourself. I just repeated it
Mm,
and I organized the sentence a little.
mm, thank you for that. So I'm wondering if you could share maybe other transformations that you've seen in people using NARM, because this was like it was subtle yet not so subtle.
It's the That's the interesting thing with NARM, yeah. It is subtle but not so subtle. I mean, just imagine relating to yourself differently. I mean, that's rather profound. We take like 18, 19, 21 years to create this self thing in us. And and then we're having these troubles with our lives. Also, a Jungian perspective would be having is evidence of wanting.
Mm,
So we created a self that actually has these kinds of results. And just imagining going back into the space where yourself lives, this here, the body mind system, and being able to slowly find out what you're actually doing there and taking away the conflicts that you have created in there, where opposing forces are trying to make something happen that will never happen because there are opposing forces who are actually the same strength. Or if the system gets overwhelmed, we kind of have an unhealthy ab reaction acting out or acting in. So really deconstructing that in a in a benevolent space that is, held with an open heart, and you can go in there and you can work in there, you can do your work in there. I think that is the beauty that NARM has brought to my life. And I'm also seeing with the people that I'm working with, or what I'm especially also seeing because I try to do that in the classes. It's of course not possible to go there in depth with 10 minutes per person, but it's so interesting to hold this perspective of 50% you, 50% me. I'm allowed to have reactions here. I'm allowed to be slow. I'm allowed to also maybe bring my own perspective. I'm allowed to invite the other person if they're curious to deconstruct what they just said, and trying to hold this atmosphere of welcome and open heart. I think that is really nice. And I think NARM, being in that NARM training and seeing people doing that very well, gave me a lot of options and I got a lot of hope that I could stretch myself into that. I really liked that.
Yeah, I can really see too, thinking about the attunement, the resonance, and even the modeling is how can you help somebody become more fully human if you're not allowing yourself to be fully human yourself and to
Exactly.
experience that full range of authenticity.
Exactly.
Yeah. Who let me ask, if how could people learn more about NARM, whether as clients, practitioners, or if they're just curious?
NARM was developed by Dr. Laurence Heller, who was a somatic experiencing trainer before that, and he's like clinically trained and all of this. So so you can learn that in a training. It is narmtraining.com. That would be basically a way into that universe.
And then he also has a book as well, right?
He has a book. Let me. The podcast is called Transforming Trauma, and he has two books. One is called Healing Developmental Trauma. That's already like over 10 years old. I find it very theoretical, but if you want to know about the survival styles, that would be the go-to. And the other one is called The Practical Guide to Healing Developmental Trauma. And that is definitely more practical, and it outlines the NARM principles and the different organizing principles and the four pillars of NARM. It talks about the emotional completion process. So everything that you would need to know to get a little bit deeper into it. And in the practical guide, there are also many little explorations, which I also like to do in the beginning of the lift classes. I also always take a topic to explore, um, and 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 then do it in a NARMic kind of way, help people to explore. For example, when we are going through resentment, then I ask them to bring up a tiny resentment that they're having
Mm.
and see what happens in them as they're remembering that situation and how they relate to themselves in these situations, and how it is to actually now see that and be a little bit outside of it and looking at it, so they get a little bit of disidentification. So that is how I've kind of engineered it into the lift classes, and you will get explorations like that in the Healing Developmental Trauma book
Mm.
from Larry as well.
Well, Gabriel, thanks so much for sharing your insight and your guidance today. And so for those who are listening, I hope this gave you something to reflect on in your own journey. And until next time, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Time with Tim podcast. If you'd like to share your own experiences or have questions, feel free to email us at podcasts@timfletcher.ca. Want to learn more about complex trauma? Subscribe to Tim Fletcher's YouTube channel for past lectures and his Friday night Tim Talks. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Looking for more support? We offer programs and courses to help with healing complex trauma and recovering from addictions. Visit timfletcher.ca to learn more or send us an inquiry. We're here to support you. Until we meet again, take care, and thank you for letting us be a part of your healing journey.